Welcome back, everyone, to part 3 as I'm doing a series on loneliness. And today we're going to get into interpreting loneliness. And this is going to be a very important session as the rubber meets the road in processing where you're at and what you're going through. So are you lonely? Are you experiencing loneliness? And one of the themes I'm bringing home here is Christians go through loneliness. And just because we are Christ followers doesn't mean we don't have seasons or struggles with loneliness. And I think many believers feel very condemned in their lonely feelings. And so because of that, they end up going down some pathways that are very self-destructive, unhealthy. They beat themselves up. And so in this series, I want to provide some insights and provide some perspectives and just some thoughts to begin to navigate this journey. So consider me walking with you as you're working through or navigating loneliness in your life and what that looks like, what it means, and then being able to tune in, what do you need? Because I think there is a lot of this going on. All the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they all belong? That I think I just sang Beatles. Is that what that is? Eleanor Rigby. This Eleanor Rigby, I'm assuming this is some lonely lady that, can we call her up and minister to her? Can she be able to get some help, some support? Well, maybe you're Eleanor, and maybe I'm Eleanor, and we all need to learn how to walk in our relationship with God and with others and with ourselves in a more fruitful way. So let me get back on track here. How to interpret your lonely feelings. I think this is really, if I could help you walk away from this session to be able to look at what you're going through with loneliness with a more enhanced perspective so that you can be a little more empowered to kind of go, okay, now what? Then this has been a great, great help for your life and your journey. So let's get into this. So when it comes to loneliness, we have to remember, loneliness is a feeling that's very subjective, meaning it really comes down to how you perceive where you are, the thoughts that you align with, and how you perceive what you're going through. So loneliness comes down to interpretation, the meaning that you give to what you feel inside. And remember, I talk about this quite often. It's not so much about the thought you have, it's the feeling and the association, the meaning and interpretation you give it that then either leads you down what that thought is saying, leads you down a disempowered pathway, or empowers you. And so I believe that loneliness can actually be a very empowering season of your life. We don't like it, we want to avoid it, push it away, hide it, but it can actually be a good thing for your healing, for your growth, if we allow it. You may feel lonely, but how you interpret that loneliness is everything. And I'm going to say today that for many of you, you're interpreting your loneliness in ways it's pushing you into deeper spirals, and it's pushing you towards greater feelings of defeatism, depression, heaviness, darkness. Your disempowering interpretation of your loneliness is not allowing you to actually discover the deeper experience your heart needs. Loneliness can provide a path towards becoming healed and matured in profound ways. I find, here's a word I want to submit to you. Lonely seasons can provide an invitation for you to go deeper with God and to experience great growth. But if you're interpreting your loneliness in harsh, condemning, hating, dark ways, it's not going to lead you to that path of invitation. Now, when we look at loneliness, some interpret the subject of loneliness by saying, we are less connected in person than we were years ago. There can be truth to that. That's something that we need to think about. But when you examine history, when you look back historically at the subject of loneliness, there have been signs of deep loneliness all over the place, all throughout history. Because sometimes we look at and we say, loneliness is increasing because we're talking about it more. There's all kinds of factors that go into that, right? The point I want to make is that historically, when it came to loneliness, many people's response to it was just, you're lonely, I'm lonely, get over it, and just move on. I'd like to take a little bit more gracious and loving perspective to that and say, let's pause a bit. Let's allow God to invite this place of our life to be a place where we can really heal. And when I began to connect to that, it helped me to really experience a greater life that was available. And it is my heart to help people navigate through emotions, not just getting certain emotions away. We're only going to pay attention to these emotions and these. There's many emotions that we need to go through and to navigate. And so where are you at in this journey? And I think that what I would like to say is there is a deeper work that's needed for our hearts. And I want to give you some important things that you can consider in the process. And you can find the treasures that are available to you. So I'm going to walk through interpretation. Some of it's going to be very, very practical. Some of it's going to be very like something for you to think about and for you to examine. Have you ever had someone walk you through how to interpret your lonely feelings? Let's start with that. You ever sat down with someone, look back at your life and say, I'm lonely, and they helped you to kind of mirror back a perspective of what you may be going through, like walk you through it? Like with your parents, did you ever express loneliness to your parents? Did you ever express loneliness to friends or to a mentor or somebody? And they help give you some handles to grab on as you're starting to navigate through it. Most people are left to themselves to just figure it out. And how's that going for you, right? So interpretation is about putting your feelings into perspective, to see it as you need to see it, so that you can navigate through it. So another word we could use for interpretation is meaning. What does this mean? I feel lonely. What does it mean? And how you answer this will often determine what thoughts you welcome next, whether you go in deeper spirals, whether you go in deeper frustration, whether you feel constantly stuck. I spend a lot of my work helping people reinterpret what they're going through, because the majority of believers, majority of people that I talk to lean towards a harsh, judgmental, self-condemning, self-hating perspective when it comes to what they're feeling and going through. We tend to default towards that because we're needing a deeper rooting in the love and grace of God. And we just go really harsh. And so I find I can do a lot of good for somebody if I can help reinterpret and help them take a step back. I've found in just one conversation that we go, can I submit this perspective to you? And I'm not just like ignoring what they've been through. I'm not washing it over. I'm looking at it square in the face. But I'm interpreting it through a God lens of faith, hope, and love, power, love, and a sound mind, the fruit of the Spirit. And that God is always redemptive, meaning he's always taking the moment right now, and he's leading us in a journey where he's taking back, buying back, turning things that were evil and turning them for good, taking things in our life and taking weaknesses and struggles and helping us to really navigate through them in empowering ways. So I've learned it's not what I'm going through, it's how I interpret what I'm going through. That's everything. If I interpret like God's mad at me, God's far away, I'm just cursed with no hope, this always happens to me, I'm never going to catch a break, that interpretation now leads me and guides me. With many people that I work with obsessive compulsive struggles, they have terrible interpretations that are very harsh, very judgmental. And many of them will, well, I'm lonely, this must mean I'm not saved. You know, they go like real harsh, real black and white, and maybe you're one of them. And I'll get into that a little bit more. But if I can find the God interpretation, it usually leads me to greater healing, greater growth, relief, burdens. I find that in seasons of loneliness, it's a time for like some burdens to be left and some shackles to be shaken off, some baggage to be let go of, to simplify, to regroup, to recalibrate, right? I remember, because many people say, well, I'm lonely. It's because I don't have someone. So they may say to me, Mark, you might have loneliness you've gone through, but you have Melissa, and you guys have a great marriage, blah, blah, blah. I don't have someone. And that is a very, very concerning A plus B equals C equation, because if you're lonely, empty, and you try to look for a relationship to solve that, to be the primary only thing to solve that, you're going to be very disappointed. And I'll show you the countless married people that are very lonely for various reasons. I actually remember, because I had obsessive, very dysfunctional thought patterns when it came to dating relationships. And God had to work me through many seasons of growing, maturing, navigating that. And I remember coming to the place where I was just, this whole idea of getting married and all this stuff was working against me. And I remember one day just kind of letting it go, in the sense of like, I'm not going to let this torment me. I'm just going to let it be. And God, I'm going to choose to be satisfied in you. And I'm going to navigate the best I can with where I'm at, with who I know. And I put too much pressure. And I think for many lonely people, they're lonely, and then they put pressure on finding someone, finding a relationship, finding a spouse, finding a friend. And you pressurize it. And I find that's not a good recipe, because then you're trying too hard in relationships, and then you're jumping in, trying to go too fast because you want your needs met. A marriage relationship takes time to meet someone, to get in that place where you feel like, okay, this is somebody I want to marry. I think it takes time when you're even having a good friend. It takes a lot of like just being open and getting to know people. So I found that when I'm not creating this as a recipe, but for me, I just let it go. And within about a month, I started really connecting with Melissa in amazing ways. And it was like interesting. Now, when I met her, I still had more work to do. I'm still in process, brothers and sisters. But it was a very interesting phenomenon that sometimes when we just let things be, what can happen to them. Look at all the things in your loneliness. Let go of the pressure. Oh, I'm lonely and I'm 65 and this and that. And you just terrorize yourself. And I should have this, and I should have this, and should have this, should have this. You're giving into the interpretation that is leaving you stuck. So then what it leaves you at is you'll only not feel lonely if you find someone. It creates this very rigid equation. So of course you're going to feel stuck. I come in as a brother from another mother to say, maybe not. Maybe that's not what it is about right now. And so I want to lead you and encourage you into embracing the interpretation that's going to lean you into what God is doing. And it starts with our questions. When we look at our interpretation, it has to do with the questions we're asking. And I want to encourage you to invite some new questions, because typically we start with questions like, what is God saying about these lonely feelings? And right there sends a lot of people off the rails. What is God saying? Well, he's saying you're not a good Christian. You're not a Christian at all. You're not saved enough. You haven't repented enough. You haven't prayed enough, done enough. List goes on. And it reveals your God image right at the jump. And it reveals we've got some work to do in understanding who God really is. And what are we attributing to what we're saying God is saying? Another question that arises, what is the loneliness saying? So you feel lonely, what's it saying? And a lot of times it's accusing. It's saying you don't have anybody. It's saying that you're unlovable. It's saying that people don't like you. We have questions, what's influencing this loneliness, right? In session 2, part 2, I talked about factors that are good to consider in your journey. Another question is, what does this loneliness say about me and where I am, or even where I am in life? Is it saying that I'm left out? I'm done. There's no more hope for me. I've made too many bad decisions. What is the loneliness saying about you and where you are in life? A question that I bring to the table is loneliness something I need to embrace or something I need to ignore and swat away, which I find many people just ignore and swat away, stay busy, keep going, and they don't go, okay, I need to just pause. I don't need to obsess about these lonely feelings, but in noticing them, I want to learn to interpret this in a way where I discover God in a deeper way. So for many of you, my encouragement to you is that in your interpretation, you need to ask better questions. Your questions often lead you towards what you interpret. So, for example, in the story of Job, Job interpreted what he was going through the lens of, what is wrong with me? What did I do? Why God? He went to the why God thing. Hold on just a second. Sorry about that. My headphone popped out. So a lot of times in our journey, we go, God, why? Right? We go to the why thing. And Job did that. And then Job's friends come along. And I talked about that in the last session, right? That's a trail I want to help lead you out of. And we want to stop asking God why, because we're not God. We're not the author. We don't see the big picture. So we're learning to trust. And God's goal in our journey is not to give us an answer to every single question that we ask. He's God. We're learning to trust in him, right? So I want to help remove this, like, why God? Because that's going to invite the accuser of the brethren in. Satan, the father of lies, will come in and try to be your daddy. By what? Getting you to ask questions that leave you spinning, and then he'll provide answers. Right? So we go, why God? And the enemy comes in and goes, I'll tell you why. Because God doesn't love you. He's not here for you. And you're a terrible Christian. You don't pray enough and blah, 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 blah. And you go, you're right. And then you follow that and try to fix it. You try to pray more, try to do more stuff, and then you're noticing yourself in a cycle. So I want to reboot the whole thing and say, we're going to do this why God stuff. And I'll give you questions that I really struggled with. These are the 3 questions that almost killed me. Okay? These are 3 questions. And if you're listening to audio only, I'll share everything I'm putting up in slides, so don't worry. During seasons of loneliness or difficulty, the 3 questions that almost killed me were, number 1, what is wrong with me? Number 2, what did I do wrong? Number 3, what am I not doing that I should be doing? So number 1, it's like, what is wrong with me? How many of you say that? You're going through something, what's wrong with me? Right? I want to interrupt that question. Let's not do that. Because when you invite that, then you're going to be analyzing yourself as a critic and just hammering away. Then we get to number 2, what did I do wrong? Then you're starting to analyze every decision you made. And then Job's friends could come along and say, yep, you did that wrong, you did that wrong, you did that wrong. Well, there's a lot of problems with that kind of line of thinking because, number 1, it invites accusation and condemnation. It's not redemptive. It's not going to help you. I'm not saying don't assess mistakes or things we learn from. We're going to do that. But I'm talking about an accusatory lens because you could say, you know what? It's because of this. That kind of equation in life is very limited and shallow. Because people say, you know, I'm in this financial situation because I didn't give enough. And I was like, well, I could find plenty of people who didn't give enough and they're not in this financial situation. So those equations we make, right, that are just not healthy. It's not about what you did wrong, because God's grace is here for us to teach us to learn. And I find that one of the things we have to guard our hearts from in pain, in struggle, is actually the accuser of the brethren. Because Satan will come in and give you his interpretation. Remember, his war in the heavenlies over you is to be your daddy. And what do I mean by that? To be what you listen to be what you're hearing. Because we all long for the Father's voice of what he says, right? That's why Jesus called him the father of lies. He's the one who's perpetuating this, but he wants to be your daddy. So blame what I do wrong, what I do wrong. So now it's fault focused, and I'm trying to fix all these flaws. And grace is here to say, oh no, that's all learning. We're in the learning season. Yeah, did you make mistakes, sins, struggles, bondage? Yep. We all have them. It's about the learning. And this last one here was really, really rough, because I would look at, what am I not doing that I should be doing? So it led me to thoughts, well, like, maybe I should be practicing this. Oh, I should study that. Maybe I should. And many of you do this. You go, oh, someone tells a story about fasting, and you're like, oh, I need to fast. That's what it is. I don't have breakthrough because I don't fast enough. And you're fasting all the time, right? And I've had to, in my work, I've people might take this the wrong way. I've had to tell more people to stop fasting than to fast. Say, Mark, what are you talking about? Because They ask these questions and they're fasting, like they're creating like a hunger strike. Like this will get God's attention. This will finally give me the breakthrough. Or maybe you try some certain type of prayer initiative or I'm going to study this or learn this or that. That's this key. You just chasing because the driving thought is there's something I'm not doing that I should be doing. So you're shoulding all over the place. And do you notice it doesn't lead you towards empowerment? It leads you to like performance. You try. And it leads us to more questions of like, God, why have you left me? Why did you do this to me? And then Christians become obsessed with like trying to find the secret formula. What's the secret formula? What's the secret formula? No, there's no secret formula. It's really about pausing, slowing down, and saying, God, I'm taking a journey. I don't understand, but I want to learn. And I want to pay attention to what your nurturing, gracious, kind love says. Because I'm listening to fear, depression, accusation, self-hate, all this nonsense. It's keeping me stuck. So I want to move you into asking some better questions to help you discover the interpretation. And the first thing I'm going to start off with is I'm going to actually turn the tables on these what ifs. The language of fear always loves what ifs. OCD starts with crazy loops of what ifs, right? So I'm going to turn the tables on it and actually empower you with what ifs. What if right now in your loneliness, you're right where you need to be? That's the first question. What if I'm right where I need to be? It's not I should be somewhere else. I should be. What if you're right where you need to be to learn what you need to learn, to gain what you need to gain, that your journey involves going through this because this is going to have the jewels of life that you need. When I look back at some of the greatest difficulties and heartaches, I still have more that I'm learning and processing through, but I look back and I see how many of the things I've been through have been added assets to what I do today because I invited the learning and I drove out the accusation. Now remember, those three questions that were killing me, it took some awareness to be able to break out of those in my life. So I want to move you back to a more empowered position with God. He's not left you, he's here. What if this loneliness is an invitation for new levels of healing? Maybe you wouldn't pay attention to something unless these lonely signals were not firing up. Number three, what if this loneliness is a signal? I need to slow down and lovingly pay attention to some things my heart needs to process. And I'll talk about some of those things that I process through that you can discover for yourself. And so here's kind of the takeaways. Number 4, what opportunities for healing and learning does this loneliness make available? We don't think of it that way, right? We're like, this is something to get off of me. I'm like, nah, I'll just lean into it and go, what's the learning here? Let me face it. Let me look at it, right? And I want to break off this pattern that Christians have of misdiagnosing loneliness. We jump to the harsh conclusions about our lonely feeling, and then we give that quick fix advice to each other. Is your interpretation harsh, judgmental, condemning, you beating yourself up all the time? You interpret loneliness through shame and blame. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with everything you've done? You're a terrible person. I'm going to be alone forever. This is never going to go away. Loneliness really easily triggers the inner critic. And today I want to exhort you to stop spiritually and emotionally abusing yourself with these thoughts. And instead, I want to invite my good Father in heaven, who sent his Son to die for me, to pay an ultimate sacrifice for me, who eternally loves me, is kind and patient with me. I want to invite his interpretation, but I got to learn to lean into love and cast out this inner critic that keeps robbing me of leaning into that. Many times, this quick fix approach in Christianity, we, throw some Jesus language to it. Say, I'm lonely, I'm going through some loneliness. That's because you just haven't given it all to Jesus. That's because you made man the focus and you haven't made Jesus the focus. We can make it sound real good, right? What we're doing is we're being abusive to people. I firmly believe that religious legalism is abusive. And many of you are healing from the mind-numbing, brainwashing, destructive power of legalism that has you spinning in a prison of you against yourself and constant spiraling, and it's been packaged in ways that sound good. You're not surrendered enough. Oh, Jesus is all you need. If Jesus was all you need, you wouldn't feel these things. If you just get in the Word. That's a good one. Just get in the Word. Do you know, I don't tell anyone to just go get in the Word, because I don't know what they're interpreting when they read the Word. They may have been spiritually abused in their perception every time they read the Word. They're not hearing the heart of God for them. They're hearing something else. I don't just tell them, just go get in the Word. If I have an opportunity, I'm going to say, I want to help you to understand how to take in the living life that is there. I could get myself into some encouragement right now. And that's good, because now we're going to talk about depression. All the lonely people. Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts, because many times loneliness and depression are connected. Depression can make lonely feelings more intensified. Loneliness can add to depression. They can kind of tag team with each other. Just think about it. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be a mental health professional. I'm not trying to diagnose you, blah, 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 blah. This is not trying to replace any professional help that you're getting. Okay. So at baseline, depression involves low mood, loss of interest, lack of motivation, hopeless outlook, right? Is there to some level, there's depression that's affecting this. Depression's that deep low that doesn't seem to just go away. So here's why this is important. One, I want you to tend to that depression. Two, depression will work against you taking the steps you need to work through loneliness. Because you might feel lonely, and you might discover, here's some things that I think would be really good for me. And then you just can't seem to make those steps. You're not motivated, and you got, Job's friends yelling, you need to read your Bible and pray more, right? So what's happening? Those advisors are giving you their interpretation of what they think you need to listen to. Now, some of us, we have very loving, well-meaning friends or loved ones that have been telling us something we're not listening. There is room for helpful advice, but what I want to do is reset the whole thing by saying loving compassion needs to be the conduit to take in perspective where someone's at. Loneliness, depression, burnout. Those are things that we need to lean towards and stop avoiding. I'm not saying, I'm depressed, I'm just going to be depressed. I'm just going to feed it. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I see it, and God, you're here, and you're going to help me learn. Because a lot of things that we face, we need to go through. We need to go through anger issues, go through grieving issues, go through depression, go through it to learn, heal, mature, and grow. So I'm going to give you some things I needed to help my interpretation. In the next session, I'll give some takeaways that we can pay attention to, okay? Here's some of the things that I needed, and you see if you find yourself in this journey. First thing I'm going to say is interpreting loneliness. I need the compassionate grace of God, because I was very hard on myself, and I was very I missed it. I'm missing God, or I'm missing something. I missed the boat. A lot of you perfectionists out there, you're obsessed with your failures, and I'd spin about them, try to fix them. Gaining a powerful interpretation of your lonely feelings is going to be connected to the compassionate love and grace of God. Because then you see what you need to see, but it's about his love so you can see it. Because you may need to see, you know what? I'm making some impulsive decisions out of this loneliness, and it's causing me to make some bad decisions. When you see that in love, you can kind of step back and go, okay, I see it. I see it. All right, I'm going to be aware now. God, I invite you into this so I can learn, so that I'm making better decisions, right? But if you're beating yourself up, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? And it was so helpful for me to lean into this statement. I'm right where I need to be right now. To learn what I need to learn, to take the next step. I accepted that I was feeling lonely, and I tuned my senses into loving grace, because many times, I'll be honest with you, many times God was just like, I sensed God saying, slow down. It's not a whole lot going on right now. Just keep it simple. And I'm like, in that busyness in me, oh yeah, but what? Just chill out. And it taught me how to be. It taught me how to be still. It taught me how to make more room in my life relationally, more space, more enjoyment, more healing to happen and take place, because I tuned into his love. I needed to slow down. Secondly, slow down, pause, and face my fears. For many of us, lonely is scary, right? And frightening. Fear of being still, of getting still. Fear of facing these lonely feelings. And I realized when I really faced him in God's love, they weren't that intimidating. I was like, oh, this is what I was afraid of? Not that big of a deal, you know? So many people, they're bothered about even getting to the lonely feelings, right? Many people can get anxious and even panic. They start dominoing. But I realized, you know what? It took me a while. I said, I'm going to face this. And I'm going to let God's compassion lead me. I'm going to tune into that. I'm going to say some interesting things that are personal for me. This applies to you. God bless you. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. But in loneliness, I actually had to learn how to be sad. I had to learn how to be sad. Do you relate to you don't know how to be sad? I don't know how to be sad. Most of my life, sadness was something I would swat away, and then I would go into pity when it would just overwhelm. It would just build up, collapse, and then I just go into pity. Oh, everything's terrible. And then I became a self-pity person all the time. Always self-loathing, feeling sorry for myself, spinning. I actually had to learn how to be sad and knowing it's okay. It's self-nurture. It's like, oh, that's sad. And even to this day, I practice that and learn it. It's like, oh, that's sad, but I don't need to spiral into destruction, and I don't need to just shove it under the carpet and wish it away. I see it. There it is. I see it. And I let it flow through me, which then taught me that I didn't know how to grieve. So I allowed myself to grieve. And grieving isn't just grieving the loss of someone who died, although that is very much needed, and many people don't process that. It's processing loss in general. Melissa and I are doing so much talk and discussion right now about working through your parental wounds and what you grew up with. And when you the phases of the healing process are becoming aware of like what you grew up with, right? What you dealt with, and realizing, oh, that was wrong, that was unhealthy, that was dysfunctional. You become aware of it layer after layer after layer. And usually the next level is allowing yourself to grieve, to feel through it and grieve it. The grieving process helps you to see God in a way you've never seen him before. And it helps you to learn things you've never learned, things you can't learn on the mountaintop, things you only learn through the valleys. Grieving lost relationships, grieving the church fellowship that you had to leave, grieving losses in childhood or never having certain childhood experiences, grieving through trauma, grieving through hardship and pain. It was like, wow, I don't know how to do this. And I learned through being kind to myself and actually sometimes putting on paper or sharing with someone, this is what I'm feeling. And I wasn't quick to judge it or quick to fix it. That's the thing about this journey. When we share what we're feeling and there's a quick fix, it's usually not the best thing. Hey, I'm lonely. Hey, why don't you join a group? Zip it. I'm just sharing this. And sometimes we just need to be understood. Right? This is a missing ingredient in relationships. We jump to the fix so we can just move on. No. Real relationships invites a lot of pauses. All right. Some things to work through. Now, the beauty that I found is loneliness. It allowed me to see myself through love. And this is probably one of the greatest things that has helped my mental health journey is me relating to myself more the way that God does. And it birthed the book, God Loves Me, I Love Myself, because in the greatest season where I felt like I was losing it and I needed God to help me through that season, he taught me how to relate to myself differently. And I'm forever grateful for it. And it birthed the book, God Loves Me and I Love Myself. So seasons of loneliness can lead you to having a better relationship with yourself, to confront the inner critic, to confront the self-condemnation, to confront the shame and all the stuff that you get hit with, and learning how to navigate through love. And then what happens is, this is the cool thing about it. In love, and I use this statement a lot in my coaching work, I pay attention to what bubbles up as I connect to God's love. Why do I use that terminology? Because, you know, when you're making like a stew or soup, you know, you kind of see the bubbles. They're not like this forceful thing. It's just, you notice, look at the bubbles. And I find, excuse me, I find revelation from God bubbles up. That's the stuff where you get changed. Now, the stuff that hits you like arrows, right? The darts, the fiery darts and arrows that fly at you. Those thoughts come quick and harsh. Bam, 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 bam. Right. Right. Trying to whip out the shield of faith, right? To just like knock this stuff, right? But that doesn't lead you anywhere. And some of it could sound, well, if you just done this, well, if you just done, okay. But is my life journey all based on me making perfect decisions, or is it really about the learning? And God is the God of now. He's not sitting there holding resentment to you about your past. He'll heal your past and work through your past. He's going to help you learn from your past. But we got to get this love thing more centered into our hearts as the main narrative, or we're not going to be able to see any of that stuff in the past. We're not going to learn from anything. Revelation bubbles up to the surface. Relational. You notice it. Wow. Yeah. It helps you pay attention to what you need to learn versus obsessing with all the other stuff that comes flying your way. God's grace has a way of taking the mess that we see and settling the sand to the bottom of the ocean so then we can see in front of us. And when you're drowning and flailing, God's nurturing compassion calms you down. And all the sand and the debris settles down. And you look out in the water. Now, no matter how clear the ocean is, you can't see forever, right? But you can see enough for the next movement. And in God's love, I'll notice the things that his love is saying. And it may just be very, very simple things. So simple you may skip it over. Rest. Refreshment. You need more time off. You need less doing, more being. You need more stillness in your life. You need more time for relationships to just sit. And you're in that performance mode and burnout mode. And that burnout is just another word for depression. Burnout is the performer's word, the achiever's word for depression. And God is leading us like never before to enter into his rest, into his love. Maybe he's saying, get back to just the basics with your marriage. Get back to the basics in your parenting. Get back to the fundamentals. That's it. That's it. Simplify. The more I grow, the more simple things get. I get back to simplicity, but it also simplifies what I chase, what I pay attention to. So what does that lead you to in interpretation of your lonely season that you're going through? And when we discover God's love, we discover his nature. And maybe you want to walk through this more practically. I encourage you, go to the Heart Healing Journey. You can get the book, and right in the middle, I have 3 chapters that navigate through the loving acceptance, patience, and kindness of God, and how you can gain his heart in what you're going through. You can even go to my topics page on my website. Go to the topics page, go to the Heart Healing and Freedom page in there. Heart Healing and Freedom. Go to topics on markdejesus.com, Heart Healing and Freedom. And then there it'll say start here. You can see a section there. And you can, for free, listen to the audio version of those 3 chapters. But I pray today will help you to connect to God's heart for you more and more, to get the interpretation he's saying. Because it's my heart to say, whose report will we believe? I want to choose to believe the report of the Lord. because for so long in our loneliness, we believe the report of the devil, and it's time to untangle ourselves and believe the report of the Lord who's here. God is here. And now, today is the day. Now is the time. And he wants to lead you into a place of healing, refreshment, and restoration. So God, I thank you for this. And I pray you let the seeds of this just grow deep in the hearts of my brothers and sisters. I thank you so much for this in Jesus' name. Amen. This is your brother from another mother saying, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, I will come with part 4 to your heart to be able to encourage your journey. Some practical things, next level. Send me your questions, mark@markdejesus.com. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, I'm out.